The heads of state and government of the 27 EU countries reached an agreement early Tuesday morning on the planned reconstruction fund for countries severely affected by the corona crisis. They've also reached agreement on the financial framework until 2027. The total volume is around 1.8 trillion euros. The EU Summit on Future Finances has started the fifth day of negotiations since midnight. Right at the beginning of the summit, the heads of state and government had to deal with the trickiest issues. For example, on Friday for hours the question of the discounts for large contributors to the EU budget, the scope of the economic recovery plan and the conditions for crisis relief as it was said in EU circles. The EU 27 were still far apart on Friday on all these issues. First, it was said one should not go into details. Change requests had been made, but the mood was not heated. It appears that the heads of state and government are saving their energy for Saturday. On Saturday morning, negotiations continue after night break. EU leaders resumed difficult negotiations on a record budget for the next 7 years on Saturday morning. On Saturday around 11 o'clock, Councillor Charles Michel will send his new proposal to the heads of states and government, and with it he brings movement into the completely confused dispute. Michel mainly goes to the Netherlands, which responded positively. According to diplomats, other states are also accepting the proposal benevolently. An impending failure of the meeting seems to be averted for the time being. The proposal will first be discussed in preliminary talks with Chancellor Angela Merkel and other important countries and will then be presented in large groups on Saturday morning. Even with Michel's modified proposal, aid would remain at 750 billion euros. However, not 500 billion euros, but only 450 billion would be granted as a grant to EU countries and 300 billion euros instead of 250 billion as a loan. Saturday at lunchtime, Council President Michel ends the round of consultations for all summit participants. After the exchange of views on his compromise proposal, individual consultations are now pending again to come closer to an agreement, his spokesman said on Twitter. On Saturday evening, the 27 EU heads of state and government gathered again for dinner in the large groups. EU Council President Michel wants to summarize the results of the numerous bilateral talks and group consultations of the day and explain possible compromise lines. Then, according to the EU diplomats, a decision should be made as to whether further consultation or postponement to Sunday morning are considered useful. At Saturday night, after dinner, negotiations will continue in Brussels. Merkel and Macron, who hold many discussions together, meet with Dutchman Mark Rutte, the spokesman for the Frugal Four, and the heads of governments from Austria, Denmark and Sweden. Their goal, the grants, which do not have to be paid back by the recipient countries, are to be cut significantly from the current 450 billion euros. The Financial Times cites the order of less than 200 billion as a demand from the Frugal. Finland is now also part of the group. The Chancellor and Macron, as well as Italy, Spain, Portugal and Greece, reject such a divergence, which Merkel warned in advance. According to consistent media reports, 400 billion euros is the lower limit. After several attempts to find a compromise, Merkel and Macron ended the meeting. On Sunday morning, little is known about the course of the third summit morning. Chancellor Merkel and French President Macron are scheduled to meet again with Charles Michel at 9:30 a.m. The EU Council President and his team also tried to explore compromise lines. It is expected that Michel, like on Saturday, will present a new set of figures that will balance the new demands of the various states. The Chancellor and the President of France had already met with Michel on Saturday before other heads of state and government were brought in to signal their willingness to continue negotiating. The pressure is great for several reasons. Many citizens and companies hope for help and want planning security. The EU actually wants to show to the rest of the world that it can act together in the crisis, and the financial markets have already priced in that there will be a corona aid package and that it will include 750 billion euros. On Sunday morning, French President Macron still believes in a solution to the dispute over the multi-billion-dollar corona aid package at the EU Special Summit. In the coming hours, the right compromises would have to be found on issues like the rule of law. However, the tone of the argument is getting rougher. French MEP and former European Minister Nathalie Loiseau accuses the Netherlands of selfishness. Rutte defends his euros, Merkel and Macron defend Europe, she tweeted. Chancellor Merkel and Macron had called on the other 25 EU governments to compromise before the third day of negotiations. On Sunday noon, Prime Minister Antonio Costa warns that the EU summit will fail and blames countries like the Netherlands and Austria for this. The resistance from the Netherlands, Austria, Sweden and Denmark was no longer acceptable. It is difficult to understand the arguments of those who refuse to agree, he said, referring to the Frugal Four. Failure would be very bad news for Europe, and all Europeans who believe in the EU and its ability to respond robustly and quickly in an exceptional crisis, said Costa. Hungary's Prime Minister Orban also made it clear, "I don't like mutual blame, but the Dutchman is responsible for all the chaos." In the meantime, the heads of governments of the hardliner states have met in Brussels in the dispute over the Corona Reconstruction Fund. In the meantime, Finland has also been added to the Frugal Four. The 5 heads of government are now discussing where they want to compromise. Meanwhile, a meeting of all 27 heads of state or government, which was actually scheduled for 12 o'clock, was postponed indefinitely. Preliminary talks continued, diplomats said. And then it's already Sunday evening. Meanwhile, bargaining continues at the stuck EU summit. The Frugal Four have launched a new offer that reduces the size of the plan and the total amount of grants. According to statements by diplomats, the total volume should be reduced by 50 billion to 700 billion euros. Half of it, that means 350 billion euros, is to be awarded as grants. This is described as the last offer of the so-called frugal countries Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark and Austria, said a diplomat. The original plan was to award 500 billion euros in grants. However, the 4 states are fighting back violently. It is questionable whether the southern countries of Spain, Italy and Portugal, as well as some of the eastern EU countries, will suffice from subsidies of 350 billion euros. It is conceivable that in the end you agree on a sum of between 375 and 400 billion euros and the so-called frugals receive an additional increase in their discount. Later in the evening, EU Council President Charles Michel made a new proposal, according to diplomats. Accordingly, the total of the grants from the Corona crisis program should be 400 billion euros. The group of frugals would have rejected the proposal. According to the information, Michel's proposal included solutions to the dispute over the control of the payment of funds, an offer for discounts and compensation for farmers in Austria, a key for the distribution of crisis aid, and for the coupling of EU funds to the rule of law. What a way out of the cul-de-sac could look like was initially left open. The heads of state and governments discussed this in large groups at dinner on Sunday evening. And then on Sunday evening, with a desperate appeal, EU Council President Charles Michel tried to save the Brussels Special Summit on the planned Corona aid from falling. In a speech at the dinner of the heads of state and government, the Belgian referred to the numerous compromise offers and concessions that he had made since the meeting started on Friday. He also emphasized several times that he had always listened to all summit participants with the greatest respect. According to the speech manuscript, he named the reason for a necessary agreement as the unprecedented crisis that the EU is facing due to the corona pandemic, but also the expected negative media response in the event of a summit failing. At the end of his contribution, Michel said, according to the speech, "It is my wish that we reach an agreement and that the Financial Times and other newspapers tomorrow will report that the EU has successfully accomplished a mission impossible." And then it's already Monday morning. After significant progress towards a corona crisis package, the special EU summit in Brussels will be extended again. According to diplomats, EU Council President Charles Michel announced a new negotiation proposal on Monday morning. This will be based on reducing the share of grants in the Corona Rescue Program to 390 billion euros. Originally, it was supposed to be 500 billion. The compromise is not yet completely under wraps, it said. Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte indicated progress in the negotiations. Rutte says in Brussels, "Sometimes things didn't look good last night, but I have the feeling that we are generally making progress." At the same time, however, he warned that failure was still possible. Kurz tweeted, Tough negotiations have just ended. We can be very satisfied with today's results. We will continue in the afternoon. According to other diplomats, the frugal willingness to talk about the extent of grants was evident. A compromise is in the offing, amounting to 375 billion euros in grants, said a diplomat. Finally, the figure of 390 billion euros was named, on which Michel now wants to base his new comprehensive compromise proposal. Strong approximations were also achieved in other points, it was said. According to diplomats, Chancellor Angela Merkel and France President Emmanuel Macron did not want to go below 400 billion euros. 22 of the 27 states are willing to contribute this amount. Originally, the proposal for the economic stimulus and investment program was a total of 750 billion euros, of which 500 billion in grants that the recipients do not have to pay back. Shortly before midnight, the plenum had withdrawn to individual consultations. The plenary break of all states, originally scheduled for 45 minutes, extended hour by hour into the early morning. The heads of governments met again in the plenary at around 5:30 a.m. Shortly afterwards, the summit was interrupted until 4 p.m., said the spokesman for EU Council President Charles Michel on Twitter. The negotiators can now use the break to find a few hours of sleep and to continue working on a solution in individual or group discussions. The Luxembourg Foreign Minister Jean Asselborn believes that the debate is dominated by small-mindedness. If this attitude had dominated in 1989, German reunification would not have been possible, Asselborn said on Deutschlandfunk. The Luxembourg Foreign Minister expressed indignation at the frugalists, as Asselborn called the Frugal Four. These are not economical at all when it comes to your own concern. On Monday morning, the size of the grants in the Corona bailout program and the question of whether countries to which such grants would be granted have certain requirements still remain to be clarified. This question shows that Spain, which has been particularly hard hit by the pandemic, is ready to compromise. According to Foreign Minister Arantxa González, Madrid is not opposed to imposing conditions or strong controls on the payment of EU Corona aid. After 3 days of unsuccessful negotiations, the EU summit in Brussels was extended again in the morning. At Monday lunchtime, Chancellor Angela Merkel is optimistic that an agreement will still be reached at the special EU summit. There is hope that an agreement may be reached on day 4 of the summit. Now it was still necessary to regulate the conditions under which funds would be paid out of the development fund. In addition, the coupling of payments from the EU budget to the rule of law must be clarified. Macron works very closely with Merkel to achieve a breakthrough. On Monday afternoon, David Sassoli appeals to the participants of the EU summit. The President of the European Parliament warns that the planned Corona aid and the long-term EU budget will be reduced too much, and he threatens the heads of state and government with a veto of the elected representatives of the Europeans. If Parliament's conditions were not sufficiently met, it would not give its consent. The multi-annual financial framework under discussion at the summit must be suitable to tackle at least the most important challenges, said Sassoli. This includes environmental protection, digitization, economic resilience, and the fight against inequalities. Measures are also needed to ensure an effective defense of the rule of law. The Italian is thus alluding to the impending weakening of a planned new budgetary instrument which should allow EU funds to be cut in the event of violations of EU values. On Monday evening, according to diplomats, the EU states agree on the amount of the grants for the planned Corona aid. Instead of the 500 billion demanded by Germany and France, only 390 billion will be made available, EU representatives confirmed on Monday at the EU summit in Brussels. This is an important building block for solving the financial dispute. Austria, Denmark, Sweden, the Netherlands and Finland have worked to reduce aid that does not have to be repaid. Originally, they preferred to only grant loans and no subsidies at all to persuade countries like Italy to adopt a more courageous reform policy. The plans were also viewed particularly critically because the EU wants to borrow large amounts for the first time for the economic and investment program. The self-proclaimed Frugal Four have been paid dearly for their consent. Everyone has been receiving discounts on their contribution to the EU budget for years. The annual benefit increases for Denmark by 100 million euros, for Sweden by 246 million euros, and for the Netherlands by 345 million euros. Austria's discount is almost doubled and is set to amount to 565 million euros. The relief for Germany remains unchanged at 3.7 million euros. An agreement on the long-term EU budget is still open. This is the prerequisite for starting the aid package. For example, at this point of time, the question remains open as to whether or whether not the allocation of EU funds should be in the future may be dependent on commitment to climate protection and compliance with EU rule of law. Countries like Poland reject this. In the night of Tuesday then, Chancellor Angela Merkel and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban spoke about the rule of law. Hungary has agreed to take all necessary steps in the Article 7 procedure so that a decision can be reached in the Council, said German government spokesman Steffen Seibert afterwards. Merkel had promised for the German EU Council presidency to advance this process as far as possible. Orban wants an end to the so-called Article 7 procedure, which the European Parliament initiated due to alleged violations of the rule of law in judiciary and media policy, and which can theoretically result in a withdrawal of voting rights. On the first day of the EU summit, it was said that Hungary would only approve the financial package if the EU dropped the procedure. Merkel also negotiated a special payment of 500 million euros for regions in eastern Germany. This emerges from the compromise paper for an agreement on the EU financial framework for the years 2021 to the end of 2027. The funds should therefore come from the EU structural fund for so-called transition regions and are intended to reduce differences in development between regions. The special payments are said to promote competitiveness, growth and employment. They should also go to some other countries such as Belgium and the Czech Republic at different levels. On Tuesday morning, the heads of state and government of the European Union want to provide around 750 billion euros to help countries that are in need because of Corona. 390 billion euros of this is to go to countries affected by the pandemic in the form of grants. The 27 states have been working on this solution since Friday. Again and again it looked like the negotiation had failed. A budget for the period up to 2027 has also been agreed. Finally, in the fight against the Corona economic crisis, the EU member states have agreed on the largest budget and financial package in their history. With grants of 390 billion euros and additional loans of 360 billion euros, the economic consequences in the EU member states hit particularly hard by the Corona pandemic are to be mitigated. In the original draft of the EU Commission, 500 billion euros in grants and 250 billion euros in loans were planned. In future, the disbursement of EU funds from the budget should be linked to compliance with the rule of law. Hungary and Poland in particular had long resisted this and threatened to veto the financial package. By means of a compromise formula, the concerns of the Eastern European states against this regulation could be eliminated. The compromise was accepted by acclamation on Monday evening among the 27 heads of state or government. The text passages are a success for the Hungarian Viktor Orban because a new protection mechanism is only to be developed. Given the majority required for penalties, it is extremely unlikely that a protective mechanism will ever be used effectively. Possible cuts in EU subsidies are not explicitly mentioned. The discounts for net contributions to the EU budget are increased. This was what the so-called Frugal for Denmark, Sweden, Austria and the Netherlands had pushed for. Germany continues to receive a discount of 3.67 billion per year as a contributor. Italy, the original European epicenter of the pandemic, is likely to be the biggest beneficiary of the plan and is expected to receive grants of around 82 billion and loans of around 127 billion, according to a senior Italian official. French President Emmanuel Macron has recognized the agreement as a great achievement. He wrote on Twitter, "Historic day for Europe." The Frenchman, together with Chancellor Angela Merkel, campaigned for the billion-dollar program to combat the corona crisis. During the over 4 days of the EU summit, there had been violent clashes with the so-called Frugal 4, which were against subsidies for needy EU countries. In the end, there was a compromise. The President of the European Council, Charles Michel, said, "We have done it. Europe is solid and, above all, united. It is a good agreement and a solid agreement. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen praised the results at a press conference. Europe still has the courage to think big. Of course, it is not what some people hoped for in the beginning, but that is the nature of compromise. When 27 different countries are working together, you always have to compromise. But to those who always comment under my videos, the EU is about to collapse, this once again is proof that the EU is working properly, that the EU is able to compromise, and that the EU is able to fight against the big challenges. And if you now want to know more about European politics from a German point of view, YouTube has chosen another of my videos for you right here in the end screen, right next to your chance to subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in my next video. Click and enjoy. Viel Spaß!